the best advice, I would say, understand those real life experiences or what a day in the life looks like, and then use that experience and that knowledge to help deliver and ensure that what you're delivering meets the desired experience.
Welcome to another episode of Legends of Employee Experience. I'm Alex Henson, and throughout this series, I'm going to be talking to business and technology leaders that are leading the charge in creating transformational employee experiences at their workplaces. Today, I'm joined by Nelm Khangura. Nelm is VP of Store and Colleague Solutions at Loblaw. Loblaw, for those of you who are not familiar, is the largest employer in Canada with over 2,500 stores and 200,000 employees. So I'm super excited for this conversation. At such a large company, not only is it tough to create a consistent employee experience, but at a company like Loblaw, there is such a diverse range of employees, from store, retail workers, warehouse workers, to corporate offices. So welcome to the show, Nelm.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
Absolute pleasure. So I gave a little bit of an intro to Loblaw, but I feel like I haven't done it justice. In your own words, can you help the viewers understand what is Loblaw? What does it cover?
Yeah, for sure. So Loblaw Companies Limited is, as you mentioned, one of Canada's largest employers with over 2,400 retail locations and 200,000 employees. Our mission is to help Canadians live life well every day, and we do that through a variety of different brands. We operate in food, in health and wellness, in fashion and beauty, and in payments and rewards. So we have a multitude of ways in which we service Canadians nationally across our country. And as you referenced, also we have, retail locations, we have distribution centers, we have store support offices. So many colleagues working hard every day to help Canadians live life well.
And so that something I want to touch on straight away. Your role as VP of Store and Colleague Solutions. And when I look at that title, it's a little bit unique, or at least it's not common. And I think the uncommon piece there is you talk about colleague solutions, and you talk about colleague experience rather than employee experience. Is that unique to Loblaw? Is that something that Loblaw created?
I think it is. I mean, the term colleague is definitely not unique. I think it's used in many places, but I think the idea of referencing colleagues within Loblaw is unique, and I think it shows more, I would say, nurturing and caring and respect for one another. Our culture is very evident throughout our organization, and so that shows in the language that we use. Yeah, so I would say it is very important to Loblaw.
I personally love it. I think it has a much more team-like feel to it rather than just someone who works for you, someone that you work with. So help us understand.
It's less transactional.
That's right, exactly, yeah. So help us understand in your role, what does that cover? What's the scope of the store and the colleague solutions team?
Sure. So I'm part of the technology and analytics leadership team at Loblaw. So we sit within technology, and my team represents store and colleague solutions. So what that means is my team provides and supports all of the technologies for our stores, our pharmacies, our distribution centers, and our store support offices. So all of the technologies that our customers use as they shop in our store, and the technologies that our colleagues across our enterprise use on a daily basis to run and operate our business and to be productive every day. So I have a variety of teams within my portfolio that are focused in those areas of store, pharmacy, and colleague. I also run our technology call center and a pharmacy-specific call center focused on pharmacy applications, pharmacy tools, and pharmacy programs to support our pharmacists.
So that sounds a little bit more complex than perhaps some other organizations, a lot of the conversations that I've had with other people on this show are perhaps more traditional organizations, largely what you might call knowledge workers or corporate workers. You obviously have a big mix of different types of employees. So how do you think about employee experience or colleague experience and creating something that feels consistent despite the fact that a lot of these workers have very different needs, different working environments, and different technology?
Yeah, it's definitely a complexity that my team has to face every single day, because we are providing not only for the colleagues within our enterprise. There are so many different personas of colleague that are out there, but also customers. There are so many different types of customers, and so we're providing technologies to service our customers, but also to enable those colleagues. So we do think about it in a persona type fashion. So we have some consistent threads of experience that apply across the entire enterprise. But then when we focus in on any given persona, we may have different tools or technologies or different adoption practices that are required. How we deploy something to a frontline worker in the store may be very different to how we deploy something to a store support worker in our corporate office. So we do have to account for those nuances, and it does create a lot of complexity, but it's very important to ensure that, there is consistency, but there is also that unique experience that each type of persona requires.
And when you and I have spoken before, you talked a lot about the cross-functional working relationships between you and other teams, employee experience or colleague experiences. Of course, it's not just technology, it's HR and it's process and it's training and leadership. Could you share some insights into how you work with those other teams, who those teams are, maybe how you've operationalized some of the conversations and best practices around driving employee experience forward?
Yeah, for sure. Loblaw is a very large organization, and as I referenced, it's made up of various different businesses that operate in different formats, whether it's food, health and wellness, payments and rewards. And so, and we also have corporate stores, we have franchise stores. So there are very, very many different variables. And then you layer on top of that the various support functions that exist in order to support and to enable those businesses. And so it's like a matrix, and there's so many overlaps and different points of connection. And at the heart of it all really is the customer and the colleague. And so all of those, whether it's running a business or running a support function, we all unite around driving a great colleague experience that enables a great customer experience. And so we always look to find the points of overlap and the initiatives that we need to come together on to make sure that we drive the right experience from all angles. And I would say I probably work most closely with HR, with operations, with change management, learning and training. And we have standard cadences where we come together on a regular basis to talk about different initiatives that are in flight. And then we also have project-specific ways in which we engage to make sure we're looking at an experience from all angles, making sure the technology's right, making sure the communications are right, making sure the aspects from a people side, from HR, are right, and bringing that all together into one experience is really important. So we have several different ceremonies or cadences by which we get together, and we make sure that we're looking at it from all angles and really driving to the heart of the right colleague experience.
So when you talk about those cadences, if someone wanted to try and learn from what you're doing at Loblaw, what are those cadences? Is that like a weekly or a monthly or quarterly operational meeting? How frequently are you getting together?
Yeah, so we do have a monthly cadence that is more of a round table that brings together various different teams from operations and technology and HR, and we review projects in flight, or we review things that are upcoming. That's our standard, repeatable, always happens every month. We have the roundtable. And then I would say on top of that, we pepper in additional meetings as they're required to make sure that we're connected. I think just that once a month doesn't always seem like enough, but at least it ensures there's something there for us to be connected on. And then from that, there's action items that, require different meetings to spur off and talk about specific topics.
Makes sense. And so I guess part of your role is to take the output of those conversations and identify where technology or systems can help bridge some of the gaps and move things forward. Help me understand how that process works. So you have a great idea, you've got a new use case that you want to solve for. How do you go from that to identifying a solution, implementing some technology and getting it rolled out?
Yeah, we have, I would say we have a fairly mature process in doing that. So we have a lot of different ideas that come to my team from all areas of the business, whether it be from the stores themselves or from other support functions or from central operations. And so we work really closely with those teams that are generating the ideas to build out the requirements and to build out the detailed expectations of what is required and how technology can enable that desired experience or that desired outcome. And then we would typically understand, is this something we will develop in-house? Is this something that we can procure? And, what path will we take? And then we would always start with a proof of concept, see if it works, move into a pilot if it does. And so we start with, I would say, like a broad funnel of ideas. And as we walk through each step of the process, that funnel shrinks and shrinks and shrinks until we land with, the handful that we believe are really impactful. And those are the ones that go on and have a life within our organization.
And what's the thought process behind where you would buy something off the shelf from a vendor versus decide that it's something that you're going to build internally?
Yeah, I think it's a case-by-case basis. It really depends on what it is that we're looking to deliver, and if we want to be experts in that, or if we are experts in that, and if that is something that is a core competency for us, or if that is something that we believe a partner has built and it has a core competency in it and has delivered it successfully such that we can just buy versus build. So it really is a case-by-case basis on how we evaluate and determine what the path forward would be. So we're a mix in our company. We're a mix of in-house build versus buy.
Yeah, makes sense. Is there a different bar for a successful pilot when you think about store technology, where it's customer facing and clearly impacting revenue versus perhaps corporate technology? Do you try and keep the same bar, or are there different levels at which you might roll something out?
I think from a financial sense, the bar is similar. There has to be a solid ROI. We're always looking for, every business is always looking to run their business successfully from a financial perspective. So I think the bar is the same from that end. I think where the bar might be different is on the experience really that's being generated, because to your point earlier, there are different personas in an office versus in a store. And so the bar of what will deliver the right experience may be different in those cases. So from a strict financial sense, I would say the same. However, when you consider other factors of where you're deploying it, then, you might have different ways to measure, or different bar for each one.
Makes sense. And so given that we're talking about employee experience, when you look back over some of the technology that you've implemented over the last couple of years, which has obviously been a very different time for everybody in the world, what are some of the technology rollouts or projects that you've worked on that you think have really raised the bar for employee experience and have had a transformational impact?
Yeah, I think, 2 years ago around this time when COVID the pandemic first started, and we shifted overnight, basically overnight to virtual. That was a really interesting time, especially for our organization. In Loblaw, we do have flexibility. It's definitely there. However, at our core, we are about building connections and making connections in person. And we generally do, I would say, have a more of an office culture versus a working remote culture. So just that shift in itself in that first few weeks of going from being in office 90% of the time and perhaps remote 10% of the time to, 100% remote. I think what I'm most proud of as an organization was our ability to adapt to that basically almost overnight. And, we introduced additional collaboration tools. We introduced additional ways to meet virtually. And we stood up adoption programs and training programs because many of our colleagues were not aware of how to use these tools and technologies because we didn't really have them. And then over time, as we started coming back into the office, we improved on how to manage hybrid and how to manage some people at home and some people in the office. So I think fundamentally, and I know it seems so simplistic, but I think fundamentally just that shift for our organization was quite substantial, being that we were, pretty much an office culture. And so that was a really interesting journey and interesting learning for my team and helping to support that shift. And something that, really made a difference and made an impact to help keep our organization operational, to help keep people connected and keep people working together, despite this sudden overnight shift into a new model of working.
And when we talk about collaboration tools, obviously the collaboration tools that get brought up the most when thinking about how things have changed is Slack and Microsoft Teams and communication tools. So I'm curious to get your perspective on what you've rolled out and how it's been successful. I'm particularly interested given the type of workforce that you have, because a lot of these tools were born out of connecting corporate workers and people that use laptops every day. What we hear a lot now is that these tools are being more widely used for frontline workers and service workers. So curious to get your perspective on whether that's been successful at Loblaw.
Yeah, it has been successful. And I would say, there's not really one in particular that we've adopted more so than the other. Our technical teams are using Slack quite a lot. Many of our other teams are using MS Teams. We have rolled out MS Teams to stores. We've also rolled out Slack to stores. So I think this is the interesting part of being part of such a large organization, is there's so many almost mini areas that really prefer one thing over another. And so the challenge on my team is always to make sure that we're providing enough different types of tools, that we have consistency, but we're also providing enough to meet the varying use cases that exist in our business. So I would say Teams and Slack, we use them both and they're both successful. We've also introduced some other niche collaboration platforms or eventing platforms that are used across for town halls and things like that. So I would say, we test many different things, and if there's a population of colleagues that really prefer one over another, and we find a way to make it work.
Speaking of testing many things, how many pilots or programs or new pieces of tech or projects can you realistically successfully evaluate and then implement over a 12-month period?
Yeah, so within my portfolio, I do have an innovation team, and they're organized around a few pillars. So they look at partnerships in industry and how we can build partnerships to support bringing in new innovations and running different proof of concepts and testing different technologies. They also have a research and development arm where they are out in the market scanning what's happening, what is up and coming, what technologies do we need to be aware of, what industry trends do we need to be aware of. And then they also have an innovation consultancy practice. And this subset within the team are innovation consultants, and they're focused solely on proof of concepts and measuring proof of concepts and evaluating whether they would be viable for pilot in our organization. And this team can do, in any given year, we may run 20 to 30 different proof of concepts and evaluate over time. And as I mentioned earlier, their funnel starts very large with ideas. They have ways to evaluate the ideas before it even gets to proof of concept. And then, the proof of concept is another opportunity to evaluate in an actual live environment. And then we scale back from there. So, a handful of those would make it into pilot potentially. And then from there, we would continue to evaluate the feasibility for broader rollout across either all stores or a subset of stores.
Makes sense. And then when you have something you rolled out, how do you think about whether it's been successful? You obviously mentioned earlier, thinking about the financial impact, but of course, when it comes to colleague experience, that's just probably the baseline. Is there some ROI? How do you think about whether something's really made a difference to the workforce, their productivity, their levels of engagement, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, this one, it really depends on what we're rolling out. But what we do at the onset of every proof of concept is we define what those performance metrics would be. So we define what success looks like, and then we measure specifically against that. So, whether that's reduction in turnover or a reduction or an increase in any other given metric, we very clearly define. And even that definition of what the performance metrics would be is a collaborative effort. So depending on who we're launching that POC with, if it's with operations, HR, et cetera, we would sit down together and align on, what are the technology metrics that we want that would prove success, and what are the business metrics that would prove success. And then those are what we measure through the life of the POC to determine, is this a go or a no-go?
Do you think your personal journey gives you a different perspective on employee experience as well as a technology leader? And I'll give you some context there. I think a common theme in the conversations I've been having is a lot of people in these roles have kind of a non-linear career path. They've been in different functions and different teams and have exposure to a range of different ways of working. And I think your own background, which I'll let you explain better than I can, but you've been in operations and supply chain. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your own journey and whether you think that gives you a slightly unique vantage point on employee experience.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that's a great point, and I never really thought of it like that. But as you mentioned, I have been with Loblaw for 15 years, and I've moved around within the organization a few times. And so I've seen the organization from different vantage points and from different angles, and been involved with different teams. And so I really feel that I've acquired a great knowledge of what it's like in different areas of the business, and how colleagues work in different areas of the business, the pressures they face, the successes they have, what makes them tick, what makes them feel like they're engaged in the work that they're doing. And so I definitely do feel like that gives me a great perspective for the role that I'm in today and the role that I play for our organization today. Definitely.
So with your own team, you have about 300 people in your team, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So I always find it interesting for people in roles like yours. You have this kind of dual responsibility of making sure all 200,000 people have a great experience, but you also have a responsibility directly to your own team and the people that work for you to make sure that they can be as effective as they can in their roles and for you and for your functions. So I'm curious to get some thoughts from you on especially given the shift to remote working, hybrid working. I'd love to get your thoughts on how you've managed to be an effective leader and keep communication with your team during this period.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an adjustment for sure. I think it was an adjustment for all of us through 2020. And interestingly enough, the role that I'm in right now, I actually began this role 4 weeks before the pandemic began. So I was only 4 weeks in my role, in a new role, with a new leader myself, and with a new leadership team myself. And then the pandemic hit and we all went home. So there are many people on my team that I did not even have a chance to meet face to face. And then I worked with for the subsequent 2 years, having not met them face to face. I hired people not having met them face to face. And I am a people person. I like collaboration. I like, sitting down and having a coffee and having a chat. So it was quite an adjustment, but I think we all adapted. We all adapted to that adjustment. And I tried my best to really leverage the tools that were available and managed to continue having town halls, having coffee chats, and all of those things that are less formal that give you an opportunity to create a connection with your leadership team and with other members across your team. I think that's the place where I tried to lead from, is we're all going through this together. We're all going through this adjustment, and how can we maintain the connection and that personal feeling so that it's not just transactional about the work day to day, but also about our relationships and how we're helping each other to be successful and helping each other to develop and grow. So I tried to leverage the tools that were available to me in order to maintain those connections and do some fun things. I had lunch delivered to all my leadership team, and then we met on a virtual platform and had lunch together at our desks in our homes. But little things I think are important to do, especially with all of the pressures that everyone has faced over the last couple of years.
Any tips or tricks or hacks, things that you think you've introduced since the shift to remote working that are maybe different to how you were leading the team before? What advice do you have?
I think I probably created more checkpoints than I had before. In the early onset of COVID, we had a daily stand-up call with my leadership team. So we would meet every day on a virtual call for half an hour just to check in and see how people were doing, what was the focus for the day. That is not something I would have done pre-COVID. I think pre-COVID, I would have run into everyone throughout the day at some point or other anyways, so I didn't feel the need to do that. But once we all became virtual, we could go potentially for days without speaking if we didn't have a standing meeting. So that's something that I definitely introduced in 100% virtual scenario, that daily checkpoint, just to maintain that connection and make sure everyone's doing well and focused on the right things.
Yeah, actually, I think it's one of the things that I've missed the most, is particularly outside of your direct reports, the skip levels, the wider team, the infrequency with which you actually get to spend time to them, I think is one of the biggest shifts that we've all had to deal with. And I think trying to find ways around that has been challenging.
Yeah, I agree.
When you think about success for your team, over a 12-month period, if you think about success this year, how do you measure that? How do you know if you've been successful in achieving your goals? Do you have specific KPIs or measures that your team track to?
Yeah, we have a few things. We have our objectives, of course. Everyone builds their objectives for the year, their personal objectives, their development objectives, and so ensuring that everyone has solid objectives and is working towards them is definitely a measure of success. We also have intention statements that we develop as a team. So as a team, we have intentions, which are more visionary, and our objectives and our initiatives should tie back to our intention statements. And those are, like I said, more visionary things we believe that we should achieve as a team or work towards as a team, more like vision statements, I suppose. And then tied to our objectives. So if I look at 3 layers, we have our intention statements, we have our objectives, and then each of our objectives have specific performance measures. So they do have to be measurable, and we have to be able to report on those measures. And so I think that's one way in which I would measure my team's success. But another way is more around just how we collaborate, how we show up for the business, how we enable the business, how we partner, because so much of our work is all about collaborating and partnering and enabling our business stakeholders. I think, I always at the end of the year check in with our business stakeholders to see how they're feeling about our success. And then I reflect that back with the team, because I think that's just another measure over and above our individual objectives and metrics and intentions, is just what is almost like the word on the street. What are our stakeholders feeling about how we've supported them and enabled their business imperatives for the year?
I'm intrigued in the vision statements. When you think about the future of work, or the workplace of the future, to use some cliched terms, where do you think there's still opportunity to really change things up? Where do you think things are going to get better in the short to medium term?
Yeah, I think for me, the future of work, I think it is hybrid. So I think the opportunity is really how to do that well and how to make that work for organizations. I think we've shown through COVID that we can flip to 100% virtual and still be effective. And now in our organization, we are slowly making our way back into the office. And so we're in this state where some people are in the office, some people are virtual on any given day. And so it's a new normal that now we have to reestablish and understand what are the right tools, what are the right technologies, what are the right ceremonies, what are the right ways of interacting. And I think making that really great is the opportunity that's in front of us now.
Yeah, love it. Nelm, I've got 4 more questions. I'm going to go through them quickly. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What's the best piece of advice you can give to someone stepping into an employee experience leadership role for the first time?
The best advice, I would say, to engage and actively listen to, in my case, the stores, the DCs, the colleagues, and what they face every day. Tour stores, do job shadows, understand those real life experiences or what a day in the life looks like, and then use that experience and that knowledge to help deliver and ensure that what you're delivering meets the desired experience.
Yeah, I think a common theme here is starting with the users and the personas, and then the cross-functional collaboration to help deliver solutions for those. I love it. Second question, what's the employee experience initiative that you're most proud of at Loblaw?
Yeah, I think I talked about this a little bit before. I would say just our ability to adapt. February 2020, March 2020, when we went from almost 100% in office to 100% virtual, our ability to leverage the right tools and capabilities to enable our business to remain as operational and productive as ever in a completely changed environment. Third question.
What's one thing every leader should be doing to help motivate their employees today?
I think that they should be making the environment that their teams are working in as pleasant as possible through communication, trust, recognition, communicating the vision always. And that's what we do through our intention statements, is communicating the vision with passion. Trust and empower your teams to make the decisions that they need to be successful, and move the needle in the work that they're doing.
Do you think you have to be more intentional about that now that we have distributed hybrid workforces and a lot of our communication is through technology and not face-to-face?
I do, because when you're face-to-face, I feel like you get to know people differently. And when you're virtual, you don't. So I think you have to communicate even more. You have to set the vision even more. You have to, energize with passion and engage the teams even more so than before.
All right, let's wrap things up with a fun question. What's one piece of technology that you can't live without in your personal life?
My phone. That is a very easy one. I cannot live without my phone. There are many days I wish I could bury it in the back of my closet. But I abandoned that idea very quickly. I cannot live without my phone.
And I have to ask, iPhone, Pixel, what's the weapon of choice?
iPhone. I have two phones, actually. I have two iPhones. I can't live without them.
Well, now I have to ask why two phones? Personal and work?
Personal and work, I don't mix it.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, Nelm, thanks for joining us. Love your insights. Amazing things that you're doing over at Loblaw. Amazing company, super impactful employer over in Canada. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Thanks so much, Alex. I was glad to be here.